Good morning. Good coffee to you. Trying out a new thing. I'm going to actually use a real live coffee cup. But it's a fairly strange one. I don't even remember where I got it. It might have been in a box of junk that people threw away. And I started 5 or 6 minutes late, so I've already gotten a bunch of messages saying, "Where are you?" I was digging out my weird coffee cup that I wanted to use today. So anyhow, there's a few things that I want to talk about today. And first of all, the overarching subject, while people that are starting to log in and start to watch, so last week, sorry, it was a long evening, and so my mind hasn't caught up to my mouth just yet. So last week I talked all about epic failures and the dynamics of which, in reference to off-grid living, and how, failure is your friend. And that was an awesome video. I really had so much fun talking about that. I got lots of great interaction with people. It seemed to me that that people were, really responded well to it, and I'm excited about that. I've noticed that my videos, I watched a few of my first of these hour-long live videos, and they were almost unwatchable. I've said it before, but they were almost unwatchable. They were, I really couldn't stay on subject. I was getting trolled at the first couple of videos, and I fell for the whole gig. But so we're going to talk today about how to talk to your friends and family about off-grid living, because that seems to be an issue. People will bring it up with their family and have these huge losses because people that they respect out of their group of friends or out of their family members will be like, "Oh my God, that sounds just horrible," or whatever, and it can be really discouraging. And that's another big failure that I've had in my experience, was at the beginning was talking to people about it. So I want to share with you how I overcame that, and how I've gotten to a point now where when I talk about off-grid living, people that live in Silicon Valley are like, "Hey, that sounds like a way better life than what I'm creating for myself now." So I'd like to help you with that. I will also say, anybody that didn't see my triumphant "I overcame leverage and gravity" video from last week, I did get that tower up. Let me see if I can actually see it. We're at a weird angle here. Flip the camera around real quick. We're at a weird angle here, so it's kind of hard to see, but if you can see right up above that tree that's in the middle there, because of the angle, it looks like it's right above the top of the tree, but it's actually about 20 feet above the tree line there. And it's been whirly-gigging around, which has been pretty awesome to overcome. I'm going to have to get used to the sound that it makes, because it does make a... remember those commercials where like, Sunday, 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 the monster truck rally? And then there'd be a sound in the background that goes... It kind of sounds like that. But I've noticed that every time I hear it, it puts a smile on both myself and Carrie's face, because we know we're making power from the wind. So that's really good. And also, we had our first week of homeschool this week, and Carrie did a couple days. I did a day full of projects, and then a couple other days of doing other stuff, like going into the umbrella school that we're a part of, which was a lot of fun. The kids had a great time. Brooklyn came out and she's like, "Okay, usually it takes me a week to make friends. I made a friend the first day." Like, yes, that's awesome, kiddo. So, and also Seattle, who is slightly more eccentric, said, "I made a friend too." And I'm like, "Really? What was their name?" She said, "I made a friend with the sandbox." Like, all right, were there any other kids? Oh yeah, there was a bunch of other kids there, but me and the sandbox, we made really good friends. This is my 5-year-old. She's going to be a comedian. I'm sure of it. So anyway, how to talk to your friends and family about living off-grid. So first I want to start with the mistakes that I made early on is, I would tell people things that were just completely and totally outside of their realm of reality. They did not understand what the heck I was talking about. So I'm like, yeah, well, when there's, some kind of a financial collapse, and the dollar's not worth anything, and we lose our status as the international trade currency, you're going to find out what it's like to be an American living in austerity, and I'll already be out there growing my own food and blah, 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 blah. So a bunch of mistakes that I made while communicating like this. First of which is all of those things that are used as a motivation are probably outside the awareness of the average individual. Most people are content to put their head down and just start going and going and going and going, and not really look at what's going on around them. And that's one of the things that I talked about last week, which was people need to start living a life where that life includes the observation of what's going on around them. A lot of people don't do that. They're more of exactly. They live in a bubble. And that bubble is perfectly safe for them. It's perfectly, that bubble is exactly as big as they feel like they are capable of reaching out and grabbing onto a subject or a goal or a purpose or anything else like that. So that's their bubble. And some people kind of make it a habit to pop that bubble. And I was one of those people. I'd be like, let's confront some real stuff, Well, what's real for that person is making enough money to pay their rent or mortgage and put gas in the car so they can make it back to work to be able to make a little more money to buy some food. You know what I mean? And that's the game. That's the entirety of the game that is played out there. So just going at it from the viewpoint that your whole game board is going to be gone in 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm just going to be the one that's prepared, and you're going to give me a call as soon as that happens because you'll know where to come and get food. And it's just not real to them. So you have to kind of go into it from a different angle. And I will say that nowadays nobody ever argues with me about the off-grid living being a good thing, because one, I very confidently own it. Where do you live? Oh, we live out in such and such. Really? There's no sewer out there? Nope, there's not. There's no electricity out there. Nope, there's not. I actually make all my own power. It's pretty awesome. I don't have a utility bill. We always have power even when a bunch of other people don't. And I like it that way. So you want to be able to have that confidence in what you're saying, first of all. Now, unfortunately, it's very difficult to have that confidence before you've actually done it, because the people you're talking to know, well, you're just taking what you think about the subject and making an argument out of it, which is actually, when I think about it, what every person does about almost any subject, is argue about what they think, not necessarily what they know. So I encourage you to find situations that you can put yourself in that will give you experience, that will give you the confidence to be able to communicate on the subject that way. But back to the reality thing. So what I usually find happens is, you'll say, I want to live off grid, to, let's say, somebody was telling me about their father-in-law, which I'm going to get to in a few minutes, but this is kind of where it's all coming from. So let's say you say, I want to live off grid, and they say, well, what's off grid living mean? The wrong thing to do is to be like, well, we're gonna move out to the woods where there's nobody else. We're gonna hunt for food, and we're gonna be, gardeners, and we're gonna have a composting toilet and poop in a bucket and cover it with wood chips, and it's perfectly sanitary. There's been lots of tests done on it. And you start going off on all of these things that people take for granted in their regular life as, like, well, why wouldn't you just go in a toilet? Why wouldn't you just turn the faucet on and get water? Why wouldn't you just go to the store and buy food? It seems like a lot of work, for not a lot of payback. And, you want your statements, or you want your your explanation of what you're doing to be less individual subject based, right? You start getting into all of these things that are over people's heads. I'm going to build a Bedini wheel and make my own energy from a stream that is, you know, down the street or whatever, you know. If you got to take on the rule almost that if a person has to Google something you're talking about, you're not doing a good job of explaining it. So what I tend to do is I say I live off grid. Person says, well, what does off grid living mean? I'll ask them, well, what do you know about the grid? Do you know what the grid is? Like, yeah, you know, the electrical power lines and everything else. Yeah. Okay, well, off-grid living is living without seeing any of those power lines. Well, how do you do that? It's actually pretty easy. I've got, what, $2,500 into my solar unit and my now my wind turbine, hey, which I got standing in the air and runs perfectly. You know, I've got all of these real easy to identify ways of making my own power. And then if I ever run out of power, I got a generator over there that I can kick on. It runs a battery charger. That charger, you know, in an hour will give me enough power to have lights all night. In an emergency, you know, situation, no sun, no wind, you know, got to do something. Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't seem too weird, you know. It positions what you're doing to something that they already understand. Okay. What you'll find going from person to person, it doesn't matter who you're having an argument with, or a debate with, or even trying to explain something with, the second you make them feel defensive is the second that they're going to fight you. They're going to start turning on their defense mechanisms and being like dismissive to what you have to say. I'm sorry, I have the hiccups. They're going to be dismissive. They're going to be condescending. And these are all mechanisms that they're using to get back on top, which seems to be a goal for for people in a debate, not to actually come out to true data, which is very odd. It's an odd goal. So that's the first thing. You want to position what you're saying to something that they already understand. And then you say, well, let me ask you this. What sort of things, like, maybe you know the person real well. You know they have a garden. You say, so you garden, right? And they go, yeah. Like, why do you do that? Well, I like to know where my food's coming from, or you know, it's a great stress reliever for me, you know. And they're going to start telling you little things that will lead to their purpose, which aligns to your purpose, right? Like, oh, I want to know where the food's coming from. Yeah, that's a real big issue. You really don't know other than a sticker. You don't know if it's a GMO. You don't know, you know, what region it came from. Is it clean? Did they, you know, grow it organically? You got all these questions about food nowadays. It's nice to know that everything that goes into your garden is, you know, is something that you feel confident that you could give to your children and not make them sick. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, we want to do the same thing. We want to grow our own food and you know, be really aware of what it is that we're eating every day. And now also, I wanted to just stop here for a second. There's something going on with my screen, so I can't see any of the viewers. But I have seen the reactions that people have made. Let me know that you guys are watching by just hitting one of the reaction buttons a few times. You know, hit the like or the love or the, you know, any one of those, and just let me know that there's some people watching. And I'm going to keep going. So now you're starting to build a situation where this person is on your side. You know, they're starting to get on your side, right? The worst mistake that most people make is they try to argue it. Oh, there they are. Hey, awesome. I'm glad to see everybody watching and reacting. That's fantastic. The worst mistake that people make when they're trying to explain what off-grid living is they get combative and they get defensive. They're like, no, I've already done a bunch of research and I know what I'm talking about, and this is a way better life. And, you know, I watch this guy on the internet on Saturday mornings and he talks about how great life is on off-grid living, you know, so I know, you know. And that's a big mistake. You know, Because when you're confident about something, you don't have to argue it that way. You just, you listen to the person and you go, yeah, you have a viewpoint. That's awesome. Great. I'm glad to hear that. And when you're not so confident, you don't actually have practical application knowledge, you tend to get defensive about it. So that's a big mistake. So stop doing that. But now that you've started positioning what you want to do to the things that the other person already has the goal to do, you start to find that they're on your side, or they're getting more on your side. They're starting to listen. You can tell because a person will start leaning into you, while you're communicating. They'll start showing you, through their body language that they're actually interested in what you're saying. They're engaged. They'll ask questions, everything else. So yeah. And you do that again. Like, well, let me ask you something. Let's say this is a person that you're close with. You've had conversations with them about things that frustrate them, and you can bring those things up. Remember last week when we were having that conversation about traffic? And they go, yeah, man, I was in traffic for 3.5 hours on the such and such coming back from work. It made my day a 16-hour day after 12 hours of swinging a hammer, or, whatever. Be like, yeah, man, I hated that. I hate that about living in the city, and it's inescapable now. There's so much congestion that if you live in a city, you're spending at least an hour a day in traffic, and that's if you're just going to the store. You know what I mean? Like your commute back and forth to work, probably even more than that. So now you've got another thing that you can position. You can ally yourself with this person. You're like, yeah, I want to live somewhere where it's not congested and where people aren't piled on top of each other, and where people can live their life without having to worry about accidentally bumping into their neighbor every single time they walk out the front door. I want my traffic jams to be made up of a hay baler that's driving down the highway to go get gas or something. You know what I mean? Like something like that. And it's lighthearted, and you're not making an argument. You are simply positioning what you want to do to what they want to do. Now, at this point, you'll find that they'll start asking a bunch of questions. At least this is what happens to me. And pretty much any subject that I'm trying to communicate on like this, or that I want to get a point across on, this is how I communicate. I'm not fighting the person's viewpoint. I already have my viewpoint, and they're not going to change it. I'm not going to change their viewpoint, and that's the viewpoint that you have to go into the conversation with. But you'll find after you've made an ally out of them, after they've become interested in what you're talking about, they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Like, well, what are you going to do about work? What are you going to do about money? Oh, I have a bunch of different solutions on that. There's, I've done some research on the area, and it seems like what they need is, a competent electrician. So me being an electrician, I'm going to offer that service to people and see if I can't help people out with, different projects and everything else. The one thing that most people don't take into consideration in this situation is it's a lot cheaper to live this way. A lot cheaper. And you'll also get people that'll say, no, it costs $100,000 to put solar in and blah, blah, blah. And they have all these ideas that they've done by doing some Google searches. And they're just wrong. It's a lot cheaper. If you're growing food, there's a bunch of money that you're not spending. If you're not paying utilities, there's a bunch of money you're not spending. It costs a little bit to get going. And we've done it a tiny bit at a time over a longer period of time. So we've really got to experience all of the joys of the win of adding 2 more solar panels, or, getting the wind turbine up, And then, so what you want to do is you kind of want to pivot at that point. You don't want to keep talking about individual subjects. At this point, when they start asking you questions about off-grid living, you want to start talking about the purpose of it. Not your goals individually. I want to be energy independent. I want to lower my oil dependence, my carbon footprint. My children are walking around. Hi there. Usually they're not awake on a Saturday morning at this time. So you don't necessarily at that point want to start talking about that kind of stuff. You want to start talking about your purpose for having made them or wanting to make the move to an off-grid life. You want to talk about, my purpose is to become an independent person, a person that doesn't rely on, anything else other than within the confines of our property. And we're not there yet. But that's the ultimate purpose. I want to be completely independent. I want to, no matter what happens out there, I want to know that me and mine are taken care of. And these are universal truths that people can get behind. You know what I mean? These are purposes that they have themselves. Why do you work so hard? You can ask the person. Well, I want to give a good life to my family. What does that consist of? That consists of, having enough money to do the things we want to do and having the freedom to spend time together and go on camping trips and everything else. Awesome. That's what I want too. And this is just the route that I'd like to take to get there, So that's going to be how you more or less communicate on the subject. I think where people go wrong is they immediately take any question as an attack on their purpose, on their basic, logic for having worked out the problem this way or that way, and you just can't be defensive, because you will make not necessarily enemies, but these people will have viewpoints, make comments, say things to other people that are against your purpose. And in that way, I guess it's more of an opponent. You make an opponent when you start getting defensive about this subject. So the trick is, first step, you want to position what you're doing to what they're already doing. Ask them lots of questions about what they do with their free time. Like, awesome, that's what I want to do too. I just want to do it a little differently with a little more space in between me and my neighbors. And then when they start getting interested and start asking you questions, you want to then pivot to communicating about your purpose, right? And what it is that drives you to do. Now, once they are on board with that purpose and they've agreed, like, well, that seems like a good purpose, but why do you want that? You'll start getting questions about why your purpose is that. And then that's going to be an all you thing. And I found that when you ask somebody, what is your purpose? They don't get defensive, because purpose is like it's a powerful thing. It's a driving force that many people use to motivate them to do all kinds of great and amazing things. So when you get to that point where they start, well, why is your purpose to become independent? We've got this wonderful electrical grid system. Why would you want to disconnect from that? We've got, the most food of any culture in history, and the choices are amazing and blah, 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 They'll start asking you why that is the case. And what you want to do there is dig deep. That's where you have an opportunity to be passionate about what you're saying. You've already handled all the earlier junk, so you can get passionate at this point. You can be like, I just noticed that the schools are going awry, and there's all this horrible stuff that's happening in the cities. The congestion is horrible. The smog, the environment in the area is terrible. There's all these health problems that are associated with living in the city. And you can just start listing stuff off at that point. And you can really drive home that you've thought this out. This is something that you have spent a lot of time considering, that you've considered all the different variables, and you've come up with this as a solution to those problems, right? I think at this phase where people get stumped is they don't get passionate about what they're talking about. That's what is going to communicate in this phase. They've already, aligned what you're doing to what they're doing in their head. They've already considered to themselves that what your purpose is a good purpose. And now they just want to, they want to see how you feel about that purpose. Well, what you want to do at that point is show them, show them how you feel about it. Tell them a story that happened. You know, for us, it was, many of you have heard the video about when we lived in Las Vegas and the power got shut off. It was 120 degrees in our house, and we had a newborn, and no refrigerator, no AC, no nothing. You know, I will often tell people that, you know, the reason I don't want to be connected to the grid and I want to make my own power is because then I can be responsible wholeheartedly for it always being on. Because of this story that happened, you know, when our first baby was born. And they'll be like, wow, that's amazing. But, you know, you could just like pay your electric bill. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You could do that. We did find ourselves in a financial hardship over some issues about businesses that I was involved in and such and such. And that led me to the area of the game of money. I used to play the game of money. That was the thing that I did with my time. I made money. I did actions that would make more money. I'd take that money and make it into more money. And that was the entirety of the game that I was playing at the time. And I was also miserable, and I never saw my family. My wife and my relationship was starting to really crumble. She hated the person I was becoming. And, you know, if you and I would have known each other at that time, you would have hated that guy too. Like, oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that seems, this is the other person. I guess that seems like a good reason for wanting to do that, you know? At this phase, they'll either do one of two things. They will continue asking you more questions because they want to see how on your toes you are. And that's me. When I want to know something about something that someone is talking about, I'm going to ask so many questions and put a person in a situation where they have to actually defend their viewpoint to me, because I just want to see what people actually think. And your first answer to what do you think about this is generally not the answer that the person really thinks. So you have to dig. You got to pull, you know, if you want to destroy their sweater, you know, pull their string as they walk away or whatever. I don't know. That was a Weezer reference. I don't know if it worked. May not have. So they'll do one of those two things. They're either going to ask more questions, or they're going to start asking, they're going to start agreeing with you. They're going to find things that they're like, you know, what I hate is I have this neighbor who does such and such at this time, and oh, that's when you do the, oh, you know, that was exactly what happened to me, and it resulted in all these cops getting called one day because there was a big fight, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. See, now you're no longer in a defensive mode. You're no longer having to be passionate. This is when you turn the tables. This is when you start asking them questions about their life. Well, what frustrates you about your life, you know, is a good question that you can ask her. Or what's the thing that causes you to have the most concern about your future? How much is your electrical bill? You know, and that's a good one. How much is your electrical bill? Oh, it's $200 a month. Really? What do you make an hour, if you don't mind me asking? $20 an hour. So you got to work such and such hours just to keep your electricity on during a time that you're not there. Interesting. You know, this is when you start asking them questions, and it starts putting them in a situation where they need to ally their actions to what you're doing, as opposed to vice versa. Because you have to realize that making the decision to become independent, making the decision to make your own power and grow your own food and take your life into your own hands and not really participate in making the problem out there worse, that puts you on a higher level. That gives you, I don't want to say moral superiority, but it gives you a moral step ladder that you can be on. You're actually making the right choice, and you have to have that viewpoint. And a lot of times in these discussions, people won't have that viewpoint, or they'll get pushed out of that viewpoint. And I think where I am successful in communicating about this subject, it's more of, I know, I'm certain. I've seen the effects that living this way has on children, on adults, on marriages, on, every different aspect of life. So I know. And I'm just getting that person to a point where now they're going to start asking me about it. Well, one of the questions that comes up at this time from people is like, what made you want to make this transition? That's when I will invariably say, well, there were a bunch of things about my life that I didn't feel like I could get a handle on, and I started looking for solutions, and it led me to this. What are some of the things in your life that you feel like, are out of control, or that you just have to throw your hands up and go, oh, well, and they'll start telling you, and that's when you start asking them questions about it. Well, how does that affect you? How does that affect your life? Have you noticed it having any sort of an effect on your relationship with your wife or your husband? What do your kids feel about it? You start asking them all of these questions that make them ally with you. And then what will happen is there'll be like this moment of silence coming from the other person, where all of this information is now coming and turning into one thought. And that thought is, if done correctly, this conversation done just like this, that thought will culminate in that person like, maybe I should look into living off-grid. And that's where I usually will start asking people questions about, what would that solve for you? Of all the things that I've talked about today, you heard me talk about this, and this. But if you were to have the same purpose, what do you think this would solve for you? What do you think your life would be like if you went and lived off-grid, if you made your own power and everything else? Well, it would be extremely different. Well, why would it be different? If you're making power, you can have all the things that you have in your apartment. How would it be extremely different? Well, I guess the differences would come down to all of the positive things that the person had said that they hated earlier, right? Like, we very rarely will run into traffic out here, and it's usually a tractor if there is traffic, or there's road construction or something like that. Our neighbors are a quarter mile away from us, or more than that. We have lots of property that the kids can run around on. We've got a full obstacle course that the kids play on with a zip line and all that jazz. And I get to do fun projects like put up that stupid tower that we have a love-hate relationship, but it's standing up and it's doing its job now. So we've got respect. See? But what I find is that now people then try to sell the off-grid living thing. As soon as the person starts giving them feedback about what they said or whatever else, this is the point where they start to say things like, well, you should check it out, you should do this, Yeah. So I'm just seeing a comment from Elizabeth Reese. So far I've heard zero that has anything to do with off-grid living. Do you live off-grid, Elizabeth? Or do you communicate with your friends and family about wanting to live off-grid? I don't know. I'm sure she'll answer in a second. You'll find that this is actually quite an issue. A lot of people actually get discouraged from doing exactly what they want to do as a result of not having the tools to be able to communicate with the people that they need support from. So I appreciate your input. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's a good thing to be interested in. There's a lot of solutions out there to the problems that people have. So that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things that are more poignant. But traffic issues as a number one reason, I don't really get. Maybe you don't spend a lot of time in traffic. And it's also not a number one reason. So, anywho, I'm going to get back to what I'm saying. So this is the, and we'll pick this up after the video, Elizabeth. I'll respond to all your comments. So this is the point where people start to sell off-grid living. Like, well, you should do this and you should do that. And, you should check out how to live off-grid, or making your own power or being an urban gardener or whatever. And that's a mistake. Now, you will tend to tell people at this point exactly all the things that they don't want to do in their life because it seems really inconvenient. The trick is to, at this point, is just be like, yeah, you should check it out more. And then, boom, like, that's it. That's the end of the conversation. And it's necessary to end it right there. Because what happens is you're going to start running into the person, butting up against all of the preconceived ideas and notions that they already have. And now you're going to be back at square one. So just end the conversation right there. Be like, that's exactly why I want to do what I'm doing. And you'll find that you'll leave them in a position where they're like, well, maybe I should check that out. As opposed to leaving them in a position where they're like, yeah, I knew that guy was crazy. I talked to this one person once who was having this exact problem. And I asked him, okay, well, how did you bring up the subject? Well, I told him that I really didn't want to be at the epicenter of a nuclear attack, so I wanted to find, some property out in the middle of nowhere where there'd be no reason to set off a bomb there, I'm like, wow. Okay, that might be your problem. That's a completely there's reasons to believe that might happen, but it's just not a realistic idea that person would be wanting to address, or change or whatever else. So that's what I have on that is it's kind of like, I don't know, everybody has been involved with a multi-level marketing company or has had somebody hit them up about a multi-level marketing company. Hey, Cody. That's my brother. He just got off-grid property and he's going to rock it out. And, you don't have to sell a good product. You have to show that it works and give people the opportunity to buy it. That's how you effectively sell things. Otherwise, you're just constantly working to overcome objections, and that can get really old. And I think people take that same entrepreneurial misconceived idea and apply it to communicating with their friends and family about a lifestyle that they want to have that is very different, or they perceive as very different from the lifestyle that those people who they wish to have support from live themselves. So I hope that helps with addressing any of those questions. I had a bunch of messages last week about this specifically, which is why I'm talking about it. And I feel that there's probably some people, and we talked to Elizabeth there, who don't see a correlation. But as you get more into the subject and you start talking with people about it, you're going to find that it's actually it's very much an issue. But then again, anything that you tell anybody that isn't the norm, you're going to get flack from, and this is how you handle that flack. So I know there's a couple people watching that did actually message me about this exact subject. I wanted to open up to any questions or comments. Usually I do these big, philosophical shows on Saturday that have to do more with the philosophy of living off grid. I wanted to do a little bit more practical today about the transition and how to not ostracize people, and that's how you do it. So anybody have any questions about anything having to do with this? If they've experienced something about talking to their friends and they got some antagonism, or they feel discouraged because now that they've got their property, it seems like the person who came up was like, ew, that's gross, or I don't want to do that, blah, 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 blah. My brother just said, my friend has a dozer in the Sierras just sitting there. He said we can use it as long as we want. Also, they gave me a radical wood burning stove. Awesome, man. That's fantastic. I'm glad that that happened, because I could use a day or two on a bulldozer myself up here. and putting a road-in up at your place so we don't pop another tire when we're driving onto the property would be fantastic. So who out there has had a situation wherein they, told a family member or whatever and got some antagonism from them on the subject? And I'm hoping my friend Doris is watching, because Doris has, was the main actual reason that I wanted to talk about this, because it's something that her family's going through. Anybody got a question out there? So I'm hoping that over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be able to, I've been looking at some broadcasting software to be able to have, like, where I can have somebody call in or do a split screen, between me and somebody else that I'm talking to about their property, or they're giving tours and everything else. So I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks that I'll be able to put that together and be able to actually put some more production quality into doing this. I really enjoy it. And it's actually very therapeutic for me. It lets me put into words all the things that I'm thinking about, as far as, solutions to various problems, or even just, handling issues having to do with the transition from, regular on-grid life, or the herd life, as I call it, and make the transition to the independent, off-grid homestead life. Because I really enjoy doing it, and I think there's a lot of other people out there that have a lot of solutions that they've come up with that I'd like to give a platform to and be able to share with everybody else who wants to live this life. And as I've said in many of my earlier videos, this is the type of life where life happens, you know what I mean? And you have to actually use your mind and your opposable thumbs, and you have to solve problems, and you have to be stubborn enough to get through those problems without having, without losing enthusiasm and quitting, because that's when you actually fail, which is what my last video was about. And I really enjoy doing it. So, if you check out our regular profile, the Jason Rutland profile at the top of the video there, I got tons of videos on, tips and tricks and things to do, to solve certain problems. We also do a bunch of funny videos. If you haven't seen them, at least I think they're funny, and, hopefully other people do too. That kind of just explain certain things about this lifestyle or handle misconceptions about it. So check it out. And also, we just started back at doing our homeschool thing for the year, so the Off-Grid Kids page will start picking up again. And that's all about, doing homeschool projects and the different field trips we go on and the lessons that we learn and everything. It's pretty awesome. So it looks like I've got a comment here from Myron. Those still adhering to social paradigm of running that hamster wheel, madly trying to pay for all the measures of American success, will inevitably hold some resentment toward those of us who have chosen to opt out. And that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, you've got these people in your life that are important regardless, and maybe there's family members, and there's or friends that you've had forever, or people that you don't necessarily just want to disconnect from. And doing this will actually allow you to have an ally as opposed to an opponent. And I think that the further into this transition that people get, they find that there's some hard times, there's really some hard times, and you still need, somewhat of you find yourself in a situation where you want to quit, and it's necessary to be like, call on your support system, and get some encouragement. It's okay, So yes, there's definitely always going to be opposition to it, especially from people who have a vested interest in you not having that independence. But you don't just have to fight that. is kind of what I'm trying to say. You can actually turn that into something that drives you and actually does help you. And I would encourage you to take that viewpoint and not make it a combative thing. And this is, you know, the editorial you, everybody watching, is, you know, you don't have to make enemies out of your environment. You can actually use it to help encourage you in the hard times. So, but yeah, check out the, you know, my profile, check out the various pages that we have that have to do with off-grid living. And my mother-in-law is coming to town today. She'll be here in a few hours, so I've got a bunch of work to do to get ready. Oh yeah, and that's funny. My mom is actually visiting my brother back down where he lives too, so we've both probably got a bit to to do to get ready for the parents to come into town. Talk to you later, man. So I hope that today was more of a practical, you know, this is something that I can use to make my transition a little easier thing. And I hope that you can use it to make life a little bit easier, because when you do make this move to off-grid living, you're going to find a lot of things do change for you pretty abruptly. And if you're not ready for those changes, it's nice to still have connection to the people that you care about back in civilization. So I hope that helps you. It's a beautiful day where we are. I know there's a bunch of horrible storms going on in various places, and we hope that everybody's safe who would normally be watching in those areas, and everybody around them too, not just the people that watch. So I hope that everybody's safe. But where I'm at, it's a beautiful day. I'm going to get out and do a bunch of chores and run the tractor for a little while, and see if I can't make it a little bit better out here for when the mother-in-law arrives later this afternoon. So I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed coffee. And I hope that you will join me next week when we are talking about something else having to do with off-grid living. And I'd actually like your guys' help on that. If you have any suggestions for topics or things that you want to know, private message me or put them in the comments, and we will chit-chat about them over the week and see if I can't put something together next week. So, love you guys all to death, and I have a bunch to do, and I will talk to you guys later. Oh, let's see, we got one last thing here. Nice to have coffee with you this morning. Now I have to go deal with our ringneck pheasants. Awesome! That sounds like a fun game to play. So I hope you win at it today. I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.